December 2025. The official report is out, and what it reveals is explosive. The deadly Manhattan crane collapse was totally preventable. For 2 years, New York's most notorious crane company sat on urgent safety warnings, ignored manufacturer bulletins, and left a single 4-pound extinguisher to fight a fire 45 stories above the city. Why did no one step in? And what else is hiding in the documents investigators just released? At 7 a.m. on a cold December morning, the New York City Department of Buildings made their findings public. The long-awaited report landed in the hands of CBS News New York, whose investigative team was granted exclusive access before anyone else. The document, stamped with the official Department of Buildings seal and dated December 2025, ran hundreds of pages, each one more damning than the last. Reporters scrambled to dissect the evidence. The headline blared across the city. The 2023 Hell's Kitchen crane collapse was not an accident, not a fluke, but a disaster that could have, and should have, been stopped. Deputy Commissioner Yigal Shamash stood before the cameras, his voice steady. He said, "This incident is and was totally preventable." Inside the report, investigators laid out a timeline that left no room for doubt. Over 2 years, forensic engineers, safety consultants, and city officials pieced together the chain of failures. Every critical detail, every ignored warning, every missed safeguard was documented in black and white. The city's top safety authority placed the blame squarely on the companies responsible. As the news broke, outrage swept through New York. Social media feeds exploded with questions. How did this happen again? Why did urgent safety bulletins go unanswered? The official record was now public, and the moral verdict was unmistakable. The city demanded answers, and the documents provided them, straight from the source. Yigal Shamash, the city's deputy buildings commissioner, did not hesitate. His words landed with the force of a verdict. He said this: "This incident is, and was, totally preventable. No hesitation, no caveats." The report did not describe a tragic misfortune or an unforeseeable chain of events. Instead, it exposed a disaster that, in the eyes of New York's top safety authority, should never have happened. The phrase echoed through the morning's headlines and across every newsroom: totally preventable. Not a vague warning, but a direct accusation aimed at those responsible. The city investigation made it clear this was not a case of bad luck or a freak mechanical failure. This was the result of choices. Choices to ignore warnings, to skip proven safeguards, to gamble with lives for the sake of convenience or cost. Shamash's statement forced a reckoning. The evidence was no longer buried in technical jargon or hidden in closed-door meetings. It was spelled out, line by line, and for all to see. Every step that could have stopped the fire, every measure that would have protected the city, had been laid out in advance and then ignored. As the dust settled on the December 2025 report, one question cut through the noise. How could a disaster so thoroughly anticipated, so easily averted, play out in the heart of Manhattan? The city demanded to know not just what happened, but why it was allowed to happen at all. At 7:30 on a Wednesday morning, the city's daily rush was already underway along 10th Avenue. 45 stories above the street, a Favel Favco tower crane swung a 16-ton bucket of concrete out over the intersection. In the cab, the operator watched the load rise until a sudden burst of smoke and flame erupted from the machinery deck beneath him. Hydraulic fluid, leaking from a disconnected hose, sprayed onto the superheated engine. Fire exploded across the deck, visible instantly from the street below. The operator reached for the only extinguisher within arm's reach, a single undersized 4-pound canister. He emptied it in seconds, but the flames fed by pressurized fuel did not even slow. There was no backup. The manufacturer's instructions had called for 2 20-pound extinguishers and an automated fire detection system, but neither was present. With the fire spreading, the operator had no way to stop it. He radioed for help and scrambled to evacuate as the heat intensified. Down on the street, pedestrians and commuters stopped in their tracks, staring up at the growing fireball. Sirens wailed as FDNY raced to the scene. Within minutes, the blaze overwhelmed the crane's critical systems. Steel began to buckle. The massive 180-foot boom, still carrying its concrete load, lost integrity. In a split second, tons of steel and concrete crashed down, shearing into the facade of 555 10th Avenue. Glass and debris exploded inward, tearing through apartments and raining over the intersection below. 12 people were hurt, 9 civilians and 3 firefighters. Emergency crews evacuated buildings and cordoned off the block, working through clouds of smoke and falling debris. Mayor Eric Adams arrived on scene and did not mince words. He said, "This could have been much worse. Potential mass casualties." The chaos on the street was immediate and total. A city block transformed in moments by a failure that should never have happened. The question hung in the air: what chain of decisions let this unfold above a crowded Manhattan street? December 2025. Investigators traced the disaster back to a simple, brutal sequence. At the heart of the crane, a high-pressure hydraulic hose had worked itself loose. This hose, no thicker than a garden hose, carried the lifeblood of the machine, pressurized fluid responsible for every movement of the boom. As the operator hoisted a 16-ton load nearly 45 stories above 10th Avenue, the hose disconnected without warning. Instantly, hydraulic fluid sprayed across the machinery deck, coating the engine and surrounding steel. The deck, already superheated from hours of operation, became a tinderbox. The leaked fluid ignited on contact, and flames erupted beneath the operator's feet. The fire spread with terrifying speed. Hydraulic fluid, once contained, now acted as an accelerant, feeding the blaze and driving temperatures higher. The operator reached for his only line of defense, a single undersized 4-pound extinguisher. He emptied it in less than 30 seconds. The flames did not even flicker. There was no fire detection system to sound an early alarm. No backup extinguishers. No automated suppression. The fire was left to grow unchecked, exactly as the manufacturer's warnings had predicted years before. As the blaze intensified, it attacked the crane's most vulnerable systems. Heat warped electrical cabling and compromised the integrity of the steel boom. Critical support points began to fail. The 180-foot boom, still carrying its massive concrete load, could no longer hold. In a matter of minutes, structural failure was inevitable. The boom broke away and plunged downward, tearing into the side of 555 10th Avenue and raining debris across the intersection. The forensic report leaves no ambiguity. The chain reaction started with a preventable mechanical failure, a disconnected hose, a spray of fuel, and a fire that was both foreseeable and stoppable. Each link in the chain was identified long before the collapse, and each one was ignored. The evidence is as clear as the wreckage that littered Hell's Kitchen that morning. After the fire and collapse, investigators turned to the paper trail. Months before the Manhattan disaster, Pavel Favko, the crane's manufacturer, had already seen 2 catastrophic fires and collapses on its cranes in Australia. Each one followed a similar pattern. Hydraulic fluid leaked onto hot engine components, igniting a blaze that raced across the machinery deck and compromised the boom. In response, Pavel Favko drafted a safety bulletin and sent it to crane owners worldwide. The bulletin spelled out exactly what had gone wrong overseas and how to prevent it from ever happening again. The December 2025 report details the manufacturer's warnings. Among the recipients was New York Crane and Equipment Corporation. The bulletin, on Favel Favco letterhead, listed urgent recommendations: inspect hydraulic hoses regularly, install a fire detection system, and equip the operator's cab with 2 20-pound extinguishers. These were not suggestions. They were clear, actionable steps, informed by fatal incidents, and sent directly to those responsible for cranes operating in crowded cities. Regulators found records confirming that New York Crane received the bulletin. Investigators included copies of the manufacturer's notice in the official report, along with internal distribution logs showing the recommendations reached New York. The evidence left no doubt. The owner of the Hell's Kitchen crane had been warned. The hazards were known, the remedies spelled out, the consequences demonstrated on the other side of the world. Yet, as the December 2025 findings made clear, not a single one of those manufacturer recommendations was put in place before the fire in Manhattan. The December 2025 investigation spells out exactly what could have stopped the fire on 10th Avenue: a handful of basic, low-cost safety upgrades, 2 20-pound fire extinguishers at the operator's station, not a single 4-pound canister, a fire detection system on the crane deck, enhanced hydraulic inspections, and a pre-shift checklist to catch leaks before they become fuel for disaster. Each of these measures was standard, proven, and already recommended by the manufacturer after 2 nearly identical collapses in Australia. None were installed on the Manhattan crane. The price tag for this entire package? Industry data and vendor quotes put the cost in the low 5 figures per crane. Thousands of dollars for detection and suppression, a few $100s for proper extinguishers, and modest labor for extra inspections. For a company earning hundreds of thousands of dollars from a single Manhattan crane job, these upgrades would barely register on the balance sheet. Yet the owner, New York Crane and Equipment Corporation, chose not to spend the money. The company's annual revenue runs into the millions. The safety package would have cost less than 1% of what a single crane brings in over a multi-month project. No evidence shows the company lacked the resources. The records show only a decision to ignore the bulletin, to skip the upgrades, to leave workers and city residents exposed. The December 2025 findings are clear. Every safeguard was available and affordable, and deliberately set aside. The result was a disaster that could have been stopped for less than the cost of a single day's crane rental. Alex Z. remembers the sound first. It was a blast so violent it rattled her bones. She was in her apartment at 555 10th Avenue when the boom came down. Glass did not just shatter, it exploded inward and sent shards and debris across the room. One shard struck her before she even understood what was happening. In that instant, the world outside disappeared. It felt, she says, like a bomb going off right next to me. 2 years later, the city's report sits on her kitchen table, but the fear has not faded. Certain noises, a siren, a truck backfiring, the clatter of construction, still send her heart racing. There are noises that bring me right back there, she admits. The trauma lives in muscle memory, in the way she flinches at sudden sounds, in the way she scans the skyline for cranes she never noticed before. She reads the findings, the proof that safety was possible and ignored, and the anger rises. Maybe they should find another industry if they are not going to take safety precautions seriously, she says. The cost of negligence is not just measured in broken glass or hospital bills. It is in the echo of that morning, replaying every time she closes her eyes. For Alex, the collapse was not just a headline. It is a wound that refuses to heal, made deeper by the knowledge that it never had to happen. 15 years before the Hell's Kitchen collapse, New York Crane and Equipment Corporation stood at the center of another tragedy. In March 2008, a tower crane owned by the same company snapped apart on the Upper East Side, killing 2 construction workers and scattering debris across East 51st Street. The owner, James Lama, faced charges of negligent homicide and manslaughter. After a lengthy trial, Lama was acquitted on technical grounds. The company kept its license, continued its business, and returned to the skyline. No reforms required. No public reckoning. The 2023 collapse followed the same pattern. This time, the Buildings Department issued a $25,000 penalty, not to the crane's owner, but to Cross Country Construction, the operator listed on the site permit. New York Crane and Equipment, the company that controlled the equipment and ignored explicit manufacturer warnings, faced no fine at all. When pressed for comment in December 2025, the company refused to answer questions. No apology, no acknowledgement of failure, no acceptance of responsibility. The gap is not just moral. It is written into the rules. Deputy Commissioner Yigal Shamash explained, "We can only issue violations to people that submit permits with us." In practice, that means the owner who profits from the lease and controls safety decisions can escape direct penalties simply by staying off the permit. The result is a repeat offender with a deadly history, untouched by the very system meant to protect the public. The city's report lays out the facts, but enforcement stops short. For victims and advocates, the demand is clear. Fix the loophole, or risk watching this cycle repeat yet again. Within days of the report's release, city officials moved to rewrite the rules. The Department of Buildings issued an emergency amendment, transforming what had once been voluntary guidance into a strict legal requirement. From now on, every tower crane operating in New York City must be outfitted with an automated fire suppression system. No exceptions, no delays. The new rule spells out, in clear language, that manufacturer safety recommendations are not blowout suggestions. They are enforceable standards. Inspectors now have the authority to demand proof of compliance before a crane rises above the skyline. Owners must document not just installation, but ongoing maintenance and inspection of suppression systems, fire detection, and hydraulic safeguards. 2 20-pound extinguishers at the operator's station are now the bare minimum. Each crane must pass enhanced safety checks before every shift, and any lapse triggers immediate penalties. The city's regulatory overhaul closes the door on ambiguity. For the first time, the exact steps that could have stopped the Hell's Kitchen fire are written into law. Mandatory, citywide. Regulators have made it clear, safety failures like those detailed in the December 2025 report will not be tolerated again. The era of optional compliance is over. Now every company must meet the highest standard or face the consequences. Right now, cranes still rise above New York, and the company at the center of this disaster continues business as usual, despite proven negligence. Regulatory gaps remain, and new rules only matter if they are enforced without exception. The next catastrophe isn't a question of fate, but of vigilance. Our city's safety depends on whether we demand true accountability. What would you risk overhead tomorrow?